Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a very, very special episode of Dragonmark Symphony.
Oh no. Okay.
I am usually your DM, Dylan, here with my friends. For the past 40-odd episodes, we have been playing through this campaign. It's set in the world of Eberron. And as of the past week there, we actually wrapped up the first major arc of the campaign, and it only took us multiple years to do it. So congrats to us.
About that part.
God, does it
We're gonna
not
get
feel like it?
real deep into that part and a bunch of other stuff. Because tonight is gonna be something a little bit different. Now that we've gone through this long journey to reach to this point. I wanted to kind of take a moment to kind of unwind with everybody and kind of catch ourselves back up on everything that happened on the campaign so far, as well as open the floor to, questions and observations and general feedback about, how the game's been going so far. And there's also going to be a few little games and challenges I'm going to throw your way too that have some interesting bonuses as well as some potential consequences. So everybody be on your toes.
Absolutely.
I know you do. That's why I pack them in every bite. So definitely be ready for that as we kind of get ourselves into it. I'm going to start some nice, comfortable music. Oops. And I immediately, this is why I'm a bad DM for the folks at home. I literally have 3 songs sitting in front of me, and I still managed to choose the wrong song. We've just started, and I immediately picked the wrong song just by having. I have 3 in front of me.
I mean, the amount of times that I did the exact same thing.
We're just gonna. There we go.
It is nice perfectly justified until it's not.
And we're gonna.
And then you get the.
There we go. And so. I don't know what I'm doing, but and so
I also don't know what you're doing. I'm afraid.
I wanted to do this for a few reasons. It has been a while since we first began the campaign, and in the perspective of the game itself, everything has essentially happened over the course of like a week or so.
Yeah,
but of course, for us, it's been a lot longer than that. So it's one of those things where there's been several occasions throughout the campaign where I felt like the pacing of the game, largely due to my own fault, has made it really easy to just kind of lose information over time, or for things to kind of happen and not really give you guys the opportunity to really like soak it in or like appreciate what's going on before it's immediately on to the next thing. So I wanted to give us an opportunity to kind of take a little breather here and just kind of go all the way back to the beginning and review everything. And, just kind of talk about everything that's happened so far. So to begin with, what I'm curious about is before we even started the campaign, before we even got into our session zeros, mind you, did y'all have any expectations kind of going into this campaign? This was my first time DMing for this group. I had never done that before. So I'm just curious if you guys had any like initial thoughts going in, sort of what you were hoping for or what you were expecting or anything of that sort.
I was gonna say, like on my end, as the most new person to this group, I kind of just came in as very much of a blank slate kind of as I could be, just because I was like, I don't know what to anticipate. I don't know what the dynamic of the group really is outside of, what I've bits and pieces that I've picked up from McKenna. But yeah, I mean, I also like to come into this stuff with like I don't want to set expectations and then, then be disappointed at the expectations that I set without any feedback from anyone else, and then be like, oh, well, that didn't do what I individually was thinking that I wanted this to go like no, just roll with the punches. It's what, to me, at least D&D is just it's role play. Like you just roll with the punches. It's improv.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I imagine you didn't necessarily. I don't know if you were necessarily expecting to die.
Okay, well,
We'll get to that.
Especially maybe then. At least then. That stage.
That is entirely valid, but also simultaneously looking at it like retroactively, even like immediately after, was just like, oh, I totally was asking for it, even though it was the very much highest damage roll possible that then just barely resulted in an instant kill. It like I'm a rogue going up to an enemy that is clearly very powerful with none of my allies nearby.
Yeah, you were essentially a rogue picking a fight with a fighter.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, I don't know. Like, honestly, like, I had very little, especially with like what I knew I was getting into with my character. I don't really have like a really strong like concept of like. I didn't really have a hugely strong concept of how it was ever gonna work, and especially in the sense of like in a combat sense. But that was, for these shows especially, that the big thing I had, learned, especially going through Embers, has been the amount that has to be secondary, because that inevitably was what led to a bunch of the issues that I had gone through with Percival. So that was a big thing that I knew I was going into this campaign with, was the notion of realizing that like being on this side, because Embers was the first time that I was on this side, like I was the player amongst generally this group, or most of this group. The only person that was inherently new at the start of Embers to me was McKenna. Yep. But like generally it was the first time flipping that. So now going from, and so at least I could take parts of that experience when we started this and, handing it over to Dylan and being like, all right, like I get to just start hopefully with the lessons that I had learned, kind of with the way that we seem to at least generally build a show campaign, because it's different than a normal one. And so like, but I was actually inherently very pleasantly surprised. I talked to Dylan about this a little bit. I was inherently very pleasantly surprised at how efficient I was. And then actually, again, it kind of became the opposite of what I was intending to fix, where my problems started to become, I was no longer 100% sure how I should behave and act in roleplay as a character. But I was really confident on what I could do in combat. I was so ready for anything.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been my like weird, because like, but I think inherently going into part of that, I think it's kind of inevitably being resolved with the changes that I'm making as a result of essentially dealing with the fact that we will not have Nathaniel kind of going into the next section. And I think honestly a lot of those RP issues and questions that I kind of have, because my thing was kind of always, like how much should I be acting like this, mysterious fairy wizard, but then inherently still like a musical and kind of bard-like? How much should I be acting like a bard?
Yeah.
And I think by making this move, by essentially now becoming both, just straight up being a multi-class, it will make it a lot easier to just be like, I am both. It's, and then
Definitely.
just have a lot more confidence in that. Because yeah, like I feel like it was really tough to get to in some scenarios it did feel a little tough to get into the playful side of like being the like bard, almost somewhat bard-like fairy, and I felt like I had to act a lot more like a wizard than I did a fairy almost, but it was conducive to the way that I had planned. But I did feel like,
and
because
Franny,
of the way the time frame was, that I generally had to be a little bit more serious more often than I was expecting.
I get you. Yeah, and Franny, because I definitely felt from everybody kind of that sense, especially like the first few sessions, of kind of getting into the shoes of your character a little more, which I expected. I anticipated that. You were kind of the one from the get-go I felt like had a really strong grasp already of the characteristics of your character, not necessarily just the class, but like the mannerisms they had and how they acted. So for you, like coming into the game, was that something that you had like really planned far in advance, or did you have expectations yourself as far as like, I'm going to come into the game, it's going to be like this, and I'm going to act this way, I know exactly how I want to approach it? Or did you have, sort of doubts in anything as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. From the jump, I was disappointed. The entire thing.
Fair.
I'm kidding. We had the pleasure of playing in this setting before with you as a DM, and during that time, I really enjoyed what you did. And I think that's the first time we got to play with you in the Eberron setting. Gave me a real good insight as to how you like to DM these types of stories. So I was like, I gotta match this energy and really work towards a character that will give you material in order to work with. So I had an epiphany with Dak, with mannerisms that were very atypical to what I usually play, in terms of speech, mannerisms, not being one in touch, not having too much of a good understanding of the local culture, stuff like that. And aside from that, I've just been finding myself having a lot of fun with the entire any lost in translation moments that we've had with that between Dag and between anybody else. And I hope it was my hope in my at the beginning of this that some of these mannerisms will become clearer and clearer for some of the for everybody else the more and more they interacted with Dag, and it has that expectation has been met. It definitely, I feel like it has contributed to how everybody reacts to Dak, even if it's more of, where's Dak? Where's the child leash? We need to put him on that.
Yeah, of course.
Especially in conversations with important people.
Especially in conversations with important people.
Oh, duct tape over Dak's mouth. We're just gonna, he doesn't usually speak up, but when he does, we need to make sure that we filter what is coming out of his mouth.
And it's always really good to have one of that character. I think when you have 2 or 3 of them, it can be potentially a little more difficult to kind of keep everybody in line. But when you have just the one, I feel like that's generally balanced enough, especially if they're not too rambunctious, to have a lot of really neat interactions where you have, the people that are more familiar with, like, things should be done this way, but then you have that one that's like, why though? What if I do this instead? And then you get that little tug of war, push and pull that ends up being really interesting.
Right.
You came into this, you as well as a couple other players, when we first started off, we had everybody on the lightning rail together. You as well as Silva had companions. You had NPC companions that you were familiar with. Which is something that the other players, just by the nature of how things went, didn't actually have. Um, and those companions, due to the events that have occurred, haven't been there significantly. They haven't played a huge role in the actual campaign itself so far. And I was a bit curious about, from the two of you, kind of your thoughts on that. Whether or not it's sort of changed how much you as a player care about those characters, and if it's like affected how you sort of think about things in any way, to have these sort of roots, but then for them to, for one reason or another, not really be present for you at all.
One of my favorite campaigns I ever did was the first real campaign that I was a part of, with the, like, as me and Franny have generally called, like, our Lake Geneva group. It was a campaign where Xanathars had just come out, so the life events table was kind of like a new thing to, like, really foster. So we all kind of just, like, decided, like, we're just gonna roll on this table we're gonna just do this table. And one of the interesting things that we had done was not only inevitably find routes to have some preemptive relationships with each other, but it was actually the relationships that our characters already had. And a couple of the more interesting ones, at least obviously from my perspective, so obviously this was just for me, was the way that we had done, because I was playing like a necromancer, and which was inherently an uncouth thing to be. So essentially having a character who then had rolled on, like, being married and having a kid, like, on that part of the table, it was like, what are the ways we can make sense with this? And it's like, oh, well, so the two ways that became was that inherently we were, like, separated. But
that necromancy.
But my sibling, but then I also had a sibling who's related to one of the two noble characters, or who's married to one of the two noble characters. So it was like this great amalgamation of, like, this, like, just really cagey necromancer who's trying to figure out the keys of immortality through necromancy, and his rich boy brother-in-law, and a couple times that those things could interact in the NPCs, and when the family of that character actually came into the general town that we were kind of around, that was like our home base town, made it very interesting. So suffice to say, I love having NPCs that you can kind of almost have a partial grounding in. Another great example to me of how that works is in Embers, with, especially, fortunately he isn't here anymore, but with Nathaniel, or Jade's character, Terry, who has Calvin. And that's essentially, it's an anchor, right? And I love having NPCs as anchors. I have definitely been in a lot of campaigns where they are anchors in a bad way and anchors in a good way, right? Mm-hmm. And they can be there are some ways where both of those can be fun. And I generally always kind of do find myself attracted to the idea of having that. I like that it was kind of there, and it was meant to be a hook into, like, ensuring that we still, kind of were cooperating, because the reality was, if we didn't, something could happen to them, not because they're going to do something, but because just something's going on. And so something might happen to them. and so that very much helps, I think, at the beginning stages. I think as we move, we'll have to kind of see how it would evolve, but I do generally like mainly having NPCs as, generally as like placement anchors. Not as much, I'm not as often, honestly, as crazy to have them, which inherently, if you paid attention to any of my campaigns, is like probably the most hypocritical thing I'm about to say. But I'm not always as super crazy about having a lot or many NPC tagalongs. Like, I always generally do like when the party is the party. Now, in our circumstance, that might be a little different, just due to our makeup. But often I do like to just kind of have it be us and our decisions, and less having the like, essentially kind of like, unfortunately, like I said, I don't think it was necessarily ever to an egregious extent, but like Caspian can, like, the downside can be sometimes a character like how Caspian was can sometimes be too much of the DM in the room sometimes. Where there can be a little bit of that, like, the NPC is saying, are you really sure you want to do that? Because it's kind of you being like, or the DM being like, are you sure about that?
So
Tim Robbins would go, are you sure about that?
I'm sure about that. Sure about that. So Caspian Durant, to kind of hop onto that point,
right?
Who, after the attack on the lightning rail, first of all, I want to address, kind of as a lead up to the previous question. So Silva, of course, had a companion with her, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Winleaf, and Dak also had a companion with them as well. And they were, I'll say, taken out of the picture quite suddenly. As a Warforged literally swept through the cabin of the train and just took them out. So I wanted to get Franny's thoughts on that. How you felt about, like, this is my anchor, this is my NPC that I know and I'm familiar with, and he's gone.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because the only reason why Dak is acting the way he is around everybody is because Ralphus is no longer there. Because Ralphus was the kind of the suppressant that kept them in check due to their own associations and the reason why they're both there. But now that Ralphus is gone, Dak realizes that he's a horse. Yes, he is a horse without a dog. He is just free.
No, it makes sense.
It makes sense.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Can we put together a list of Dakisms and just continually compile that list throughout this campaign? Because that, I think, would go right for the top.
If you show me a list of Dakisms and a list of Franny-isms, I'm going to tell you it's the same list.
It's the same list. It says Dakisms, and then in parentheses it says also Franny.
That's why it's so easy to play Dak. I just say what comes out of my mouth, and it works. It just works.
No, but I definitely understand what you're getting at, though, where it's like, this is a character who was very reserved and was clearly like, they act a very different way around certain people than they do around others. And then for them to kind of be in this new environment, it's like a wild animal sort of like testing out its environment and seeing like, okay, can I go over here? Let me sniff this area. Let me make sure this is safe. And it's a lot of the stuff you've done reminds me of like a really skittish animal or like a small child that's like testing things out and seeing like, how far can I reach before I do something that's going to be a problem? What can I, how far can I extend my feelers out and, stretch a little bit?
Precisely. That would be. That's probably the better way of putting it. And when just the abrupt way he was gone, and the fact that since then Dak has been placing a lot of blame on the name of Ralphus. Because if you guys remember, every single time someone asks his name in the beginning, he's like, my name is Ralphus. Probably indicates the relationship that the two had, or at least what I imagine the relationship the two have had.
Yeah, I was gonna say the interactions that Set had with Ralphus, the very, very brief interaction, kind of spoke volumes about how
little brusque in the beginning.
Ralphus. Yeah. So it was like, oh, whenever you would like blame Ralphus or utilize Ralphus's name, Set would always just kind of be like, yeah, it's fine. He's either dead or he's kind of a dick, so he deserves it. So
yeah, precisely.
The lightning rail attack is of course the catalyst, haha, wink wink, of essentially this entire journey, as well as you all ending up together as a group, because you happen to be sort of in the same general area when the attack happens. So by circumstance, you're in the same areas. But then after the attack, you are led off of the train and introduced to Caspian Durant and Deirdre, and sort of all taken into one carriage and end up traveling to the nearby capital city of Rote, which for most of you wasn't a very familiar place, and for a spare few of you was. So just real quick, I wanted to sort of address why I made the decision to start the campaign here. We established, Marshall was kind of tapping into it, where Caspian Durant pretty clearly is a fully fleshed out character in the world with his own motivations and decisions and such, but he is also in a lot of ways a surrogate for myself, with the express goal of being there to kind of guide the players through what was I consider to be kind of this prologue of getting everybody used to the idea of the world and what they can do and what's capable in it. I wanted to have somebody there so that they weren't just like completely lost from the get-go, not sure of what to do, and also was a somewhat authoritative figure while simultaneously not being somebody who is going to just like stop them at every turn and be like, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you know, that's against the rules, don't do that. So it made the most sense to me to have a character like Caspian be sort of in that position to sort of take you all in under his wing, so to speak. When you got to the capital city, you were taken to the Citadel, which you've now visited multiple times throughout the campaign. You were sat down in a big room, and there was a plate of donuts on the table. Marshall and Franny probably remember this, but in the previous campaign I did with them, I did a very similar scenario where I had all the players sat in a room together with a plate of donuts on the table. The reason both times that I did this is that it is, in my mind, there's other ways to do this, of course, there's hundreds of ways. But in my mind, it is one of the easiest ways to get all the characters in one place, sit them down, and let the players decide how they would react in a way that isn't going to like immediately screw up any elements of the campaign. Because if you put them in a room, locked in a room together, and all they have is a plate of donuts, there's only so much chaos they can immediately rend onto your world. And how it's just a really easy way for the player to go, well, my character is cautious, so they won't take a donut, and that'll communicate to the other players how this character feels. Or like they immediately take the donuts and start stuffing them in their pockets, that tells the other players a little bit about their personality without them expressly having to say
donuts in their pockets.
sure, but it tells the other players without them expressly having to say, hi, I'm so and so and I'm very chaotic and goofy and I'll do the thing. It's just a really clean and simple way to do that, and there's
simple and clean
tons of ways to do that otherwise, to kind of allow characters to introduce themselves to each other.
The way that you make me feel tonight.
Yep.
But it's just, for me, there's something really charming about it. And plus also, a lot of the decisions I've made, even if they don't seem explicitly so, are based around the fact that Eberron as a world, when Keith Baker designed it, he was designing it as something that really feeds into like the neo-noir genres. And noir storytelling, noir filmmaking, and things of that sort. So it's just kind of like a little gag to have such a early point of the campaign be sort of the stereotypical, put the criminal in the interrogation room and see what happens when you put a plate of donuts in front of them. You, at this point, were introduced to, because Caspian returned, but he had somebody else with them. He had a mage, one of the main leaders, one of the main figures of the King's Wands, a man by the name of Nebek. So real quick, I'm going to give 25 gold to whoever answers this question first.
Okay.
Nebek had a autonomous quill with him that was able to take notes and seemingly act semi-freely. Does anybody remember the name of the quill?
Archimedes.
Ah, damn, I was gonna say Quilliam. You didn't say that it had to be correct.
Can't check your notes.
Yep.
It has been mentioned.
Yes, Archimedes.
It is not Archimedes.
Shit. Secretariat.
It is Secretariat.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
I thought it was something like that. I was like,
My whole bit was
I
just
remember
gonna be
the
to
name
say-
because
rack my
to
brain.
say
Dak
something
wanted
first.
to steal it.
Yeah.
My whole goal was just to say something first so that it would
Yeah,
because
of course.
just hit that bit.
So yeah, you met Nebek, who was sort of gathering more information in terms of this investigation. From this point, things kind of shifted a bit, because this is where Caspian sort of made the decision of like, we are going to have all of you be a part of the investigation actively. And so I'm going to take you with me, as opposed to just having you stay here at the King Citadel and just wait out, whatever's going to happen. And from there, you all were able to kind of start exploring the city of Rote for the first time. And I believe it was right within that moment, or around that time, that you first paid a visit to the Winchester Scythe, which was this like very old, extravagant sort of theater. And you were able to have dinner there. Here, you all ordered drinks. So 5 gold to anybody who can remember the drinks that were ordered.
Dak got like the weird ass tea that made him hallucinate.
Yeah. It was the one with the high alcohol content that I didn't realize had a high alcohol content.
Well, because why would
Because Francisco in real life doesn't drink.
Well, I also said it was. Well, that was the thing. It was just labeled as a tea. That was a small trickery where they weren't immediately just like, this has fucking absinthe in it.
I believe, if I remember correctly, the effects, not to like nitpick you or anything, but just for the fun, it was more akin to Everclear than absinthe in terms of like the effects that it
Everclear,
had.
Yes, that's what it was. Sorry.
Because it put Dak in this like really like dream-like state of like floating and just being like, but the orders were 2 of you got citrus flagons, 1 of you got the Winchester special, another person just got a glass of water, and then we had Dak, who got the tea, which I just have in parentheses Everclear.
I think I remember correctly. It's just you just said the Everclear tea.
But yeah, you all sort of got drinks and you sat down. As you were at the Winchester Scythe, a really curious thing happened. You were introduced to two more characters. A man by the name of Sandy Crodstock, who was very intoxicated at the time that you had met him. And you were also introduced to a gentleman going by the name of Trist. The two of them seemed to be in pretty good spirits. They were very cordial. And then Trist was sort of offered to take Sandy to have him go sit down somewhere. And I believe it was Set, if I remember correctly, who noticed that Trist seemed to have a dagger pulled and was sort of holding it firmly against Sandy Crodstock's back. And for additional measure, sort of turned around and gave you something of a wink, like a devilish wink. In that moment, what were you as a player thinking? Because you had just met this character, and then you immediately get this really weird interaction with them, something that not everybody else saw. How are you sort of like thinking in that moment? What was your mind going through of like what's happening here?
So I feel like at that moment, Set really didn't have much of a connection to the party. It was kind of just well, we're here, might as well like roll with it. Set has their own goals and, stuff that they need to do. So let's just kind of roll with it until we're able to accomplish what we want to do. And in that moment, that's kind of why, upon seeing that, Set kind of just went to Silva and was like, do you care about that guy at all? Like, no? Yeah, all right, I'll ignore it then. That's not my problem. I have no interaction with them. I don't really care about them. Like, I at that point really really playing it up as a like, yeah, this is kind of how Set has been, just because of kind of a little more backstory, like just because of like the trauma that they've kind of gone through with interact with all of their interactions from a young age. So it's just like okay, well, if I don't need to get involved in this, then I'm not going to, because that could just cause me more problems.
Right. From there, after that evening, we went into kind of the next big thing to happen. Was that we, the group as a whole, ventured outside of the city walls and went south to the Baron's Keep. This abandoned military keep that had not really been occupied much since the ending of the last war. The goal was to travel there by horse so that you could hopefully gather more information about the warforged that had attacked the lightning rail. It was believed that there was some information, possibly a ledger of info that could be used to sort of identify which warforged specifically attacked the train and where they had been stationed prior. So you all arrived at the Baron's Keep at night, and it was eventful. You all had a pretty hefty conflict with some spirits inside of the keep, as well as coming across, a few items, grabbing a few books here and there, getting into fights with some suits of armor. And the culmination of this was, of course, really interesting, because I didn't expect it to go down this way. To put it simply, sort of near the end of combat with these poltergeists, these spirits, I had designed in advance a very specific rule for them, not expecting us to get into a situation where it would really come into play, but as just kind of like this thing. And it was the idea of like, well, it shouldn't be. I wanted to set them apart from like regular like ghosts or spirits or anything of that sort. I wanted them to have a really unique flavor to them. And I was thinking about how if one of these ghosts kills you, that shouldn't be like the end, quote unquote. There should be an additional level of what they would do, because any ghost really could kill anyone. It makes more sense for them to have like an additional need beyond that.
Mhm.
So I figured, well, it makes sense then that they don't want to just end your life. They need what is inside of you, what you harbor, which is a soul inside of this person. So it's not enough to just kill you. It's not for fun, you know, it's to get to your soul, for it to be accessible for them to then ingest it for their own means. So you died as a character.
No, real.
I managed to roll maximum amount. You went fully unconscious and then dead. And so it was this very split second thing of like, the spirit has sort of absorbed most of your soul, but they haven't absconded with it. So you're dead, but you're not 100% out. And if the spirit had successfully gotten away with that soul and had like utterly disappeared without everyone being able to finish it off, you 100% would have had to make a brand new character, which I would have felt terrible about, straight up. But you would have had to make a new character because that character, as we know it, just would not exist.
Mm-hmm.
And your remains, if they had not been buried properly within 24 hours, you would have arisen as a revenant form. Think Crimson Heads from Resident Evil. Your body would have arisen with most of your abilities and your intelligence intact, and your impulse would have been to attack whatever you had seen last. So you would have chased the party down to the ends of the earth as a soulless husk, and they would have had to have destroyed that husk, or otherwise it would have just kept following you until it killed all of you.
That would have been interesting.
Which would have been really interesting, but I'm personally grateful that you all were able to finish off those spirits when you did, and that you were able to get Set's body back to the city so we could then have that whole process. Because again, to be that early in the campaign and immediately have like, okay, this character's dead, isn't fully my goal. And I say that knowing that when we did our session zeros and we did our initial meetings and all that, I was very clear that I was like, okay, first of all, I'm going to gesticulate a lot with my hands when I talk, so be ready. And then the second thing is that combat is going to be challenging. It hasn't happened nearly as much as I would like it to have in this campaign. And again, that's just pacing issues with me poorly pacing it out. But the idea going in was like, everybody who's playing this game has played tabletop RPGs before. Nobody's green here. Everybody has experience. And I feel like Eberron, being what it is a world that is so entrenched in magic, where a lot of elements of it are normal and commonplace to the point of being banal. I didn't want you guys to feel, especially starting out, that this was a cakewalk. The last thing I wanted to do was to have you guys be like, okay, so you guys are at like level 2. Here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna go out into a field. You're gonna slay 10 wild boars so you can level up. and complete this quest out, and then you're going to return that quest to the guildmaster. And, you know, just like the basic MMORPG, you know, first quest of the game type of situation. Like I wanted to stray as far away from that as possible. And I wanted to put you guys in real danger, but still give you the opportunities to really defend yourself and, you know, improvise out, not necessarily feel like you're just stuck to the actions that are on your character sheet. Like, really take use of the environment. Baron's Keep was littered with broken chairs and tables and remnants and old books and bookshelves and all kinds of items, because I wanted to give you a kung fu set. Which means if you ran out of spell slots, if you ran out of actions, if you ran out of things that you as a character specifically could do, I wanted there always to be something in reach where you could dive over a table, or you could grab a mug and throw it at somebody, or you could kick a chair in front of a door, or use the environment in that way. And I've tried to do that with a lot of the encounters we've had in this campaign. I've tried to set it up so that there's always something around you. The only real exception being the last encounter we had, your fight against 3, where I very specifically put you in a room where it was just, for the most part, it was just you and the big bad. We got out of Baron's Keep. You were able to get set back to the city of Rote. And in order to resurrect them, as the time had passed to be able to do like a simple revivify, and none of you had the capability anyway, Trist, who we had established earlier, ended up fronting the bill, as it were, to have a resurrection scroll taken from the Citadel and applied by one Matthias Caldrew to resurrect you and to bring you back to life. Trist, I'm trying to think of how to say this. You weren't supposed to meet him this way, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because I hadn't anticipated you or anyone else dying that quickly. This is the point where a lot of what I was planning, and all DMs are familiar with this feeling, this is the part where a lot of what I was planning really changed. And it was like, okay, I don't have to throw out a lot of the bits and pieces that I've got set up. You know, I'm not getting rid of all the pieces on the chessboard. I just got to move them around. I got to reconfigure them. I had the king over here. Well, now I got to move him over here because there's no knight in this. Or however chess is played. I don't know how plays. I don't know.
I was gonna say you're doing some weird things with chess over there.
I put the backgammon pieces in front of the knight because the knight can only move in diagonals. I know you're with me so far.
Yeah, sure.
All this to say, the next time you were gonna meet Trist had absolutely nothing to do with the Citadel. It had nothing to do with Matthias Caldrew. It would have been a completely different scenario, completely different circumstance. But it made sense as far as like who at this point in the campaign, if anybody, is gonna care enough to front the bill to make this happen. And I knew Matthias was going to eventually be involved because of the role that they played in the greater mystery. But they also weren't originally going to be introduced in that way. It was going to be, again, under different circumstances. And it just so happened that it was like, okay, I need to have somebody on deck to resurrect them, and I need to have somebody on deck to front the costs. And of course, that means that Caspian has to do some behind the scenes work to make sure that this all stays off book, so to speak. And who's going to do it? Who's going to be the mage that does it? It could be Nebek. No, it can't be Nebek because he's here right now. He's doing this other thing. It can't be them. No, it can't be them. And I basically had to go through, and it was like, okay, no, I need to introduce Matthias Caldrew about 6 or 7 sessions earlier, because I need that. They're the only one in this moment that makes sense to be able to do this. We go through the resurrection process. During this time that you are not fully alive, you encounter a deer. Let's talk about these deer for a second.
Please.
How do y'all feel about the presence of deer in this campaign so far?
Away.
In general, like
I feel a way about them.
Mm-hmm.
It is such a good like way to kind of throw us off kilter when they pop up, which is really nice as like just this like kind of consistent story mechanic for all of us, but also have some nuances for each person of how this deer interacts with them, and even stuff that they bring up that other characters can hear, where it's like, oh, they don't know that, no one else knows that, let's hope this just kind of blows over, or it's not further questioned or stuff like that. So I think it's a really interesting mechanic.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the deer is very it was very good at being a very deep omen. Like, it's inherently unsettling, but it gives like very little to necessarily assuade that it is particularly friend or foe.
Mm-hmm.
But instead an omen.
Mm-hmm. And Franny, your thoughts on the deer?
They freak me out in the right way possible.
It's good.
I have always been a fan of narrative devices that make appearances throughout the story, and the minute you introduce the deer a second time, meant that it became one of those narrative devices, and I was like, yes, I fucking love this. So I'm very curious to see what happens, especially since I don't know whose backstories they tie into specifically, but they've shown themselves to all of us. So it could be everybody or one specific person, and by association, we're all seeing these visions. So it intrigues me so much. I'm so intrigued, as one Benoit Blanc once said. Just ignore the first half of that quote.
No, I'm glad to hear that. You are at fault for why we're seeing them now. Speaking above game, because essentially what happened, if you all recall, before even going to the Baron's Keep, you all were provided with horses to take to the keep. And there was this situation where Dak is on a combination of still kind of riding the high of the drink that they had imbibed. And then they get, if I remember correctly, it was a natural 20 on like a animal handling check with your horse.
Uh-huh.
Where you just like tapped into like this mind connection with the horse. As a goof, I put that horse there because I knew it was intriguing enough that somebody might pick it. And as a goof, that horse is way more important than it has any right to be.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
And my expectation was that Silva would end up with that horse, and there would be some thematic elements that could connect there. but you got it instead, and then you rolled that nat 20, and I thought, well, the state you're in and the connection that you have now forged with this horse means that even though you are not fey in nature, there's still going to be a moment where you're going to be able to establish this connection, and you're going to see some shit that you absolutely are not supposed to see or hear. So you open the door, so to speak, because the horse immediately starts talking about fear the red is coming. And then we get to Set dying and being in this weird, not quite. We get into this weird situation of Set is like, you're dead, but your soul is still fully intact, but there was a prolonged period where it was separated from your body. Very specific circumstance. Which is why we get that very first sort of moment with you when you haven't been fully resurrected yet, and you're in that boat, and you see the corpse of the deer for the first time, and the head raises up and it talks to you, and it tells you to jump out of the boat. So to show my hand fully, this deer, as I'm sure you can assume, is extremely important to the overall story I'm trying to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly. But you've only gotten a hair's length of a glimpse. Y'all were not supposed to know or experience anything related to these deer until level 10 at least.
Oh.
Yeah?
This was back half of the game for me in my planning and what I had set up.
But you were just like, man, these are some circumstances. Well, time to bust out the deer.
the circumstances were such that I was like, it is, and it's gonna make a lot more sense down the line when and if or when you guys, sort of unlock what that is about and what that whole situation is. It doesn't make sense for the deer to ignore the events that have occurred. For this to happen in such proximity, it's one of those things where it's like they notice that this is happening, and even if they don't want to get involved, they gotta get involved. They need to make, they gotta show their presence in regards. And that's how we get the whole situation with sort of Silva having that really like deep dream or vision, where she's deep in the forest, and there's the deer that, approaches her and sort of breaks off into several other sort of spiritualized deer figures, giving that omen about the red coming down from the sky and the sea of red that spreads out, and just this very complex, sort of almost prophetic like statement that's given to you. All that was supposed to be far off in the future, way off in the future, and it was just the way things have happened, the way things have occurred. I was like, I guess we're doing it now, and it's not going to make sense right away. It's going to take time for this stuff to make sense, but we're going to introduce it right now, and then we'll see how the players react to it, if they really dive into it, or if it's just, all right, well, that was weird. Anyway, on to the next thing. Yeah. So, Set, you're resurrected. You have a nice, wholesome chat with Trist, where Trist sort of begins to reveal a little bit more about themselves.
Nice and wholesome.
So we established like your first sort of impressions of them and what happened at the Winchester Scythe. At this moment, I'll forever cherish the look on your face as this sort of began to like unfurl. So, Marshall and Franny, your anchors were with you when we started this campaign. Every other character, their anchors aren't gone forever. They're absolutely here. They're just not with them right away. but I very intentionally set it up. It was like, I know who these people are connected to. I know what their relationships are, how this is set up. I'm going to place these people here. These people are going to be here. These people are going to be here. And with Trist, that was always going to be something that eventually happened, where there was going to be that moment where you two had that one-to-one, and they were going to kind of reveal who they really were, in a sense. And again, it just so happened that because of the circumstances of, like, you are being resurrected, so now it's going to happen while you're in this hospital bed.
Yeah. While I'm strapped down to a bed and I can't do anything and can't react.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that was a thing too, where I definitely thought about that. Was like,
inherently,
yeah. Go ahead.
I want to go over the fact that, like, the fucking balls on this guy of Trist, who fucking just was like coming in, being like, by the way, it's like, fucking get out of town, blah blah blah, and like disguise as a doctor and shit, and then like go through all that shit later and just like completely just never give up the ruse.
Yeah,
and then
no,
at
let's
the very
talk
end,
about
just
that.
be like, remember, out of town.
You didn't forget, right? You still remembered? Got it? No, okay. Just doing like the SpongeBob snaps as he walks out.
SpongeBob snaps.
No, yeah, because that ended up being like a very. So obviously Trist started as like a Set-centric character, very much an anchor for Set, but sort of by way of how the events were occurring, everyone in the group eventually got introduced to them. There's the whole situation where you guys kind of were speaking with them at the Cow's Eye, the semi-interrogation that happened. There was a lot of obvious, flip-flop back and forth as far as like, can we trust this person? Are they involved? It seems like they're involved to some capacity. You guys, not as your characters, but as the players, you guys, going through most of this campaign, were you going through it like, oh, this guy's guilty 100%? Or was there genuinely like that doubt, like, I'm not sure what their actual involvement is in the whole thing?
I mean, I eventually started to doubt just because of the fact that of just like, at this point, because it's, whenever you're dealing with somebody who can be a shapeshifter, it's like, man, who knows?
I definitely think that I was suspicious, but also it wasn't I know 100% that they were involved. It was they could be, like, they very well could be, and because they are so skilled at what they do, they could be hiding it pretty easily from people who that's not really what we do. But then also with everything with Matthias and then that group of rich bastards, like, that really, I think, pulled some of that suspicion away, because like, as suspicious as Trist was with that interaction, like the fact that Matthias was just like, all right, bye, and then pieces out, and then these guys are all super shady, like it just, the suspicion was definitely like still lingering a little bit there, but like this was like a big flashing light in your face, like, hey, I'm doing shady shit. Like, okay, yeah, obviously we're gonna focus a little bit more on that, especially with as the time went on. Like, yeah, in game, like you said at the beginning, like in game, at this point, there was only like, Set had been resurrected for like a day or two when we start, like, or maybe it had gotten on to 3 at that point, but at that point we're starting to plan the Velvet Curtain stuff, and like oh yeah, like it's been a year since Set died, but it's been 3 days in game.
Yeah.
So like, kind of, I think that also led into it because like, especially towards the end when we're talking and doing the planning for our infiltrating the castle, basically, it was like, oh wait, what the fuck happened to Matthias? Where is he? What is going on with that man? Like, is he involved in this? Like, he's a powerful magic user. And so like, it finally like clicked and I was like, wait a second, we're forgetting about this super powerful mage that has just suddenly disappeared.
Well, that's what got me the inspiration before the siege, was I was like, oh hey, so because we were like, who would be controlling 3? If 3 is under control from someone, who would be controlling him? Oh well, Matthias disappeared.
Matthias was a shady little shit too.
Oh, I mean, no,
Yeah,
he's
and
100% involved in this. Like, look, 3 is inherently showed no signs of being a, like, or 3 at no point showed, like, any signs of being a powerful spellcaster. Specifically, one that would be, because if he was inherently such a powerful spellcaster that he could rewrite memories, I don't feel like we would have won that battle.
Yeah,
Probably
accurate.
not. Unless we all crowded him and just kept rolling really good. That's metagame.
Yeah,
Hey, I mean, we did do pretty well.
High level spells there are. We know what
That's
high level
true.
spell. You can crowd a wizard, but like all he needs then is a fucking like any form of like high or like a high level like cast on self AOE, and you're all cut up.
Well, even if it's not a cast on self, it's just I have spell shaping. Like, fuck all of you.
So I mean, yeah.
So-
like, in terms of like being like because 3 never really gave that indication. Like I feel like inherently the disappearance and setup definitely gave it way too much to, in any shape or form, leave any doubt or remove any doubt of Matthias's involvement.
Yeah, Matthias is a very interesting character, very pivotal character. And I had to be extremely careful about how I presented them, and there are a few reasons for that. The first, because as I said, they're very important to the sort of the integral thread that was happening. The other thing is that I didn't want to reveal all their secrets, quote unquote, right away. And there's still a lot that you as players and as characters don't know about them. Especially now that they've just like vanished. The other thing was that when we started the campaign, one of the things that I kind of laid out that in terms of knowledge coming into this, for Kevin, I was like, you don't need to have been a part of our smaller series, Year of the Toad. Even though it takes place within the same world and it happened, a year prior, you don't need to worry about knowing anything from those sessions or having been involved. This is a fresh story with new characters. What I did there is a really advanced DM tactic called lying your ass off. Because of course I was going to be taking things from Year of the Toad and they were going to carry over into this new campaign. 100%. Mm-hmm. For me, it was just a waiting game of when Marshall or Bennett or Jade or Franny, when any of them was going to have that moment of recognition, when that spark was going to go off of, I know this guy. And then it was just going to kind of go from there of like, you motherfucker, all bets are off. It's not, anybody can show up really at this point. So I had to be really careful and reserved about how I presented Matthias because I didn't want to just like blow the lid on that right away. And so that resulted in you having this one meeting with him in his apartment. A body of the landlord gets thrown through the window, smashes the piano in the room. Set very successfully, showing how he can make an egg disappear.
All I'm
all
saying.
Oh man, my hearing and comprehension during that specific conversation was just, I in real life rolled a natural 1 and just fucking botched it. Like,
also, if I remember correctly, I just realized, no, that was the fucking thing. Wasn't the inspiration coming from the fact that we realized that probably wasn't Matthias, because he was essentially refusing to utilize any magic?
I mean, he's a powerful spellcaster. He can do whatever the fuck he wants.
That's what we were getting at, was like,
there was a moment, so there was this moment where you guys were trying to work things out, and there was this very clear line being established of like, he deliberately asked you all to perform magic for them instead of performing it themselves. And there was this curiosity being brought up of like, why would the wizard not just, show off that they can, make the egg disappear immediately themselves? And so there was questions of like, well, if this is maybe this is someone posing as them who can't do magic, and so why would they show any, they wouldn't be able to cast spells regularly because they're not actually the wizard that they claim they are. And so there was that like uncertainty going around of like, maybe this isn't Matthias, maybe this is someone posing as them, or maybe, Matthias is posing as a wizard, or, there were ideas floating about, but nothing concrete was established.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thread towards the end there, it was diving into that very deep memory where Francisco was able to access a deeper level of it as Dak, and actually see the moment where Cassowary Dubois' ancestor meets with that shadowy figure, and the figure casts the spell on them, convinces them to create the secret passage. And one of you, it might have been Silva, but somebody picks up on the fact that the voice of the mysterious figure sounds near dead on to Matthias Caldrew. And that was the big like aha moment of like, okay, that's our end goal. Because you were right, Marshall. It didn't make sense that 3, who up to this point hadn't really been presented as any kind of like an experienced magic user or anything of that type. And also, like, there were a lot of inconsistencies with how time was working and where people were at certain times. And there was this thing of like, it doesn't make sense. Like, we know that 3 is quote unquote behind this, but it doesn't make sense that they would be the person to pull off this like generational mind alteration that was integral to this being able to work in the first place. And so that was that big moment, that big eureka of like, who's the person that's missing? We know we've got all these people involved. There's so many people involved in this investigation. Who's the missing factor? And it was Matthias. So I want to get into from here, because we had this very big sort of branching point. There was a really big discussion that was had back at the Cow's Eye, where it was the decision that was that needed to be made was, from here at this point in the investigation, did we want to go relieve the city and head south to the King's Forest? Because if you remember, this was presented to you as an option by Caspian like quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Of like, I've got intel says we should go due south. There's an outpost there, an abandoned outpost, based off the information we got from the ledger, that we can get more info from this outpost. Sort of nestled in the King's Forest there. Or there's also the whole situation with the Velvet Curtain, if y'all recall. and the decision that was made was to tackle, because we had a note that was clutched in the dead landlord's hand, that pointed to a set of initials, and the conclusion that was reached was that while we weren't 100% sure, they may apply to a man by the name of Ezekiel Eberson, because there was an EE in the note. So this is what sort of got you guys pointed in the direction of like, okay, well, we know this guy from Dak reading the local paper, that we know this guy was in some way in connection with Sandy Crowdstock, who has been murdered. And we figure out that, like, okay, so this guy is a pretty important figure. He's a land baron, and the expectation is that he's going to be at, he's often seen with his cohorts at the Velvet Curtain because he enjoys the shows there. So you had this point of choosing between these two options, going to the Velvet Curtain or heading south to the forest. I genuinely believe that y'all would go to the King's Forest first, because this was just after the occurrence of the whole apartment, the incident that happened there, and you guys narrowly managed to escape and you know, make your way back out through the crowd. In my mind, I thought that you guys would immediately choose the King's Forest so that you could stay sort of out of sight, out of mind until things sort of cooled down a bit. And this is one of those things where it's like, here's a lesson for the DM to learn. So I had everything for the King's Forest prepared. I had, I'm going to say 30% of the Velvet Curtain ready when you guys made that decision. And I went, okay, I've got homework to do. So I remember that part specifically because that was where there was like multiple, like, all right, I'm staying up until 2 a.m. to get everything ready for them to be able to do this, because I wanted them to have the choice, and I want to honor the fact that they didn't go with the option that I was expecting them to. Like, I called it wrong, but that they shouldn't be punished for it. We're going to get this set up. So you all are getting ready, sort of spread out to grab supplies. By this point, you've also had the opportunity to kind of walk the city a little bit, and you've had the chance to meet a few characters. You go into a few clothing shops, meet the blacksmith, and you also got to meet a character by the name of Victoria Skeevel. Just curious, this many sessions into the campaign, what do y'all think her deal is? Just fully curious. What do y'all think her deal is?
A role model.
Fair. Goals.
Honestly, like, I'm half torn between she is just this really old, like, eccentric magic user, and also she has to be like some patron, like some like other being, and more leaning towards that after our foray into whatever the fuck she's got behind her bookshelf.
So, Marshall, you as Silva got to have a whole side adventure behind that bookshelf.
Oh, great.
Which was great. I'm not disparaging in any way, and I hope you enjoyed it too. That was another one of those things that was like, I've got this tucked away for later in the campaign. This is one of those little secret things I've just got kind of hidden away, because I have a ton of them. I'll be honest. There's way too much going on in this. I've just got this little thing tucked away. You know, maybe they'll find out about it later. I'll just keep it tucked away. And it was like, well, you're checking this bookshelf. You rolled just the right rolls. I'm like, it's one of those things. It's just like, it makes sense to happen now. It doesn't, you know, it's not going to completely break the campaign if I introduce this concept now. It can happen now. You went through that little adventure, and at the end of it, you came out with a card, sort of akin to like a fortune telling card, like a tarot card. And so, like, I have no trouble because I haven't yet introduced in any way what the purpose of that is in the world. You just got this tarot card after going through this like terrifying library maze. And that is another one of those things that was like, I had this set aside for a later day, but I guess it's today. When we did everybody's session 0, do you all remember how we ended each of your respective session 0s?
Absolutely fucking not.
Okay.
Drawing a tarot card.
That's true. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I don't think you
remember that.
You didn't tell us what the results were, did you?
Correct. Yeah, it was
Correct.
just a choose a card, and this is a special tool that will help us later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Marshall got to be the lucky duck that found that tool in game and was the first to find that. We are 100% going to address this in the near future unless you all decide to keep going. And I'm not going to elaborate on what that means. I'm just going to say that is there. You will find out what that means soon, or you will make the conscious decision to go the other way. But yeah, that was another, and that was really great too. I really liked. It's really important to me that you guys get to do as many things as possible as a. But I also do appreciate the smaller moments where one character gets to kind of do something by their own. And Silva has gotten to have a couple opportunities with that. She's been really interesting in that way, where she has had these moments to really sort of break off from everyone else and be on her own and sort of experience things on her own. The other big thing I think of is like when she sort of snuck out at night and went off to visit Thomas Winleaf at the medical tents without anyone else, and she got to really like experience what the city looks like at night, and also got to have that additional conversation with Bree, which was, it served multiple purposes, of course. You know, it was a chance to kind of get to know him a little bit more, but also to establish that 3 has full access to everybody in these medical tents, which means he'll have no problem taking them all as hostages later on.
Granted, that wasn't the thought that crossed my mind at the time.
Of course, yeah, because there was nothing at that point that like would point towards that.
Shadowing.
Yeah, so getting back on track, Victoria Skeevel is, I've not hidden at all that she's one of my favorite characters that I've made. I love her to death. You haven't even seen this. You haven't gone past the surface with her. Hope you'll be able to unearth more. She is one of the first characters I made for this campaign. I figured a lot of her stuff out prior to anybody's session 0s. It was around the same time that I sent out the original like documentation to you guys, like the original like introductory Word doc. That initial planning multiple years ago was when I first sort of charted her out. And so she's one of the oldest characters in the campaign, obviously not like one of the most prominent, but I'm really proud of her. And I kind of use her as an example of my style of DMing, which is to say I don't have one and I'm actively learning it as I go.
I thought you were going to say she's an example of your psyche.
A bit of that too. A lot of things. Me as a DM, I think it's kind of been clear. I hope it's been clear. I am not a 100% railroad DM. I am also not a 100% you are on your own, do whatever you want, go anywhere, do anything DM. Because I have a very clear idea for the story and, sort of the larger thematic elements, with the acknowledgement that you all are the ones playing and you are the ones who choose where the story goes and where it's going to turn and change. Skeevil is a great example of how, for some reason, I love creating characters who refuse to do anything but yes and any of the chaos going on around. You've had characters that were very serious, you've had characters that were very dedicated with their own agendas, their own goals, but I feel like all of them, to some degree, if something happens, there's a level of just like, okay, that happened, I'm in, I'm a part of it. And a lot of that comes from some of my favorite elements of comedy and how comedy works, to get on like a really pretentious level. My favorite moments in comedy are somebody being put in a ludicrous or crazy situation and treating it like it's normal and it's just every day and this is just what happens and this is how it works. Leslie Nielsen in Police Squad or any of the Naked Gun films or Airplane is a prime example of that, where he is in these ridiculously insane scenarios and he just treats it like it's nothing, and it's just
Rest
like,
in
oh,
peace, Leslie.
there's no wall here, sure, of course, that's how it should be. And so Skeevil is like, she's that cranked to 12, and then with all of my other characters, I'm just taking that dial and I'm adjusting it accordingly. Because again, this is Eberron, it's a world where magic is super commonplace, and a lot of this, to a degree, is supposed to be normalized. So you're not going to run into many characters, if any, that are going to be like, what is that? How did that happen? That doesn't make any sense. How did he find? Like, everybody's going to have some level of like, yeah, sure. Well, let's go with that. We're just going to follow that, see where it goes. So every character, to a degree, is basically like somebody who's been in improv classes for a few years. And they are just going to kind of go with the flow, go with everything. And that's, again, it's because I don't want to put you guys in a position where I'm constantly telling you no or that you can't do things. So even when I give you an NPC that's like a wizard cop, quote unquote, there's still aspects of that character that make it so that they aren't necessarily going to force you to just like stick to the law 100% of the time and are going to give you okay, before we completely run out of time here, we go to the Velvet Curtain. Real quick, I just want to give a quick shout out to Francisco. You did something that I really appreciated as a DM, which is that you took the opportunity, which was you guys going to get, you and Nathaniel going to get the outfits for the evening. And you did two really cool things. The first cool thing that you did is that you had the audacity to set it up so that the royal family was going to receive a bill for the outfits. And there was just going to be no consequences to that whatsoever. Nothing bad is going to happen. Very cool. I love when that happened. The second really cool thing that you did is when you took the opportunity, as this plan is being formulated, of like, how are we going to get in? What are we going to pose as? How are we going to present ourselves? And you took the opportunity to go, I will be the person from a foreign land, and I'm going to take little parts of my culture that I haven't really expounded upon with the group yet, and I'm going to use those as part of this identity that I'm taking on. And it was a really smart way to, kind of put in these little bits and pieces about your character's background without, again, explicitly being like, I'm from this place and everybody from here is like this and they all do this thing. And when I grew up, it was all like that. Like you were just like, no, they would wear this color. The purple is an important color. If you are greeting this figure, they're going to say this.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you present yourself in this way. Just a really good way to like introduce that culture without having like a history thesis that goes on for 2 hours.
Right.
So yeah,
I've
kudos
been
to you
guilty
on
of that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just glad that it worked to a certain extent. And I may have, during that time, Dak may have let on a bit too much if people were paying attention to the things you were saying during that time. So that's all I'll say to that. But it was definitely very fun to build the royal family. And then, because in all honesty, Dak would have been like, yeah, they'll be fine. They have money.
And then also insinuating that a coup is happening somewhere.
Yeah. So this is what's rad. Because I'm not just saying that was a great choice because I got to punish you for it later.
Right.
It was a great choice because of how conveniently it lined up with everything else that was happening. Because what you did is like you basically built the board game mousetrap. And then you were like, I'm going to drop a marble over here because it's fun to watch the marble fall. And then not realizing that the slide you built over here goes over to the elevator here, which then lifts up and goes down this tube. And then it hits this hammer. And oops, these things are actually connected that I had no idea were connected at all. So there's this whole background element of like, there are people within the city who are not happy with the king's rule, especially post-war. There are people who do not want a war to happen again, and there are others who had a very vested interest in the war effort. And so you have these conflicting sides, and there's this whole background thing of, these sort of murmurs of people that are dissenting and who have reasons to be angry with the royal family and with how the nation is run. And so you managed to sneak in this little element of like, there's these whispers of a coup going on to then feed the fire. And then you guys are off to do this thing, which of course ends in disaster because there was no way I was going to let this just end peacefully and everybody goes home happy. But all of it fed into this panic that was building. About like, oh, well, there were these, there were mysterious people that weren't accounted for. And what if this is part of the coup that everybody's talking about? And, oh, it's happening. This is the moment.
The coup everyone is talking about is the key point there, too, because it's like, oh, yeah, as soon as you start the merchants talking about a potential coup, everyone knows about a potential coup.
Right.
Yep.
It's
like you're getting sized for clothes. Oh yeah, did you hear? I heard from this other customer that there's whispers of a coup going on. It's like, oh, all right.
I'll be honest. The original reason for that plan in general and going with that was because Dak and Francisco are aware that everybody loves a good piece of gossip. And what better piece of gossip than, hey, they're going to overthrow the government?
What better piece of gossip except the biggest piece of gossip that there could be?
No
big, and people will believe how big it is. Yeah, it has to try to not sound like a conspiracy theorist, though. So you have to insert yourself into it.
A couple quick things at this point in the campaign. One, yes, Clark Bart was 100% off the top of my head.
Yes. We knew, don't worry.
I rolled a natural one as Caspian. I had to come up with a name on the spot.
Dak is going to name his first son Clark Bart.
Because I have to say that because there's a lot of, I can't stress enough, I am a crazy person.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stuff in this campaign that you might think was that was something off the top of my head. And the reality is that no, I planned that in advance, and there's actually a ton of connecting branches to this thing. So I want to emphasize that Clark Bart doesn't have any kind of like crazy lore behind it that you're going to uncover 50 episodes down the line. I don't want to set you up for disappointment. It's just
What?
it's just the name I came up with on the spot.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
I know. I just wanted to be sure.
What do you mean Clark Park doesn't have a whole
There's no
hero's
that's what I'm saying.
origin?
Right.
Wait, you mean Caspian isn't actually a prince?
There was that brief hope.
Mhm.
There was that brief emotion that probably went through the king's brain when you said that, where he was like, I know this this group just saved me, but like, do I play along or do I have this guy thrown in jail?
I want to emphasize that point that Clark Bart was made up in the moment, because the whole thing with My Fair Lizard Folk, which yes, it's for the most part it's just a pun on My Fair Lady. Have any of you seen My Fair Lady?
No.
I haven't had the pleasure, unfortunately.
I was curious if anyone had seen My Fair Lady, because this is why I'm crazy. My Fair Lady.
Just this?
No, but I haven't revealed a lot of the other stuff yet.
Got him.
My Fair Lady is the story. It is a play about a woman from the lower end of society. She is poor, who two rich men get into an argument, and they make a wager that one of the men can take her and make her proper for society, more suitable for the upper class, and convince others of that class that she is one of them, as it were. And so they take on the bet, and he sort of introduces her into that upper echelon, the upper class, and hijinks ensue. And it's a heavy commentary on sort of the roles of that time and the perceptions of the class systems, which, wouldn't you know it, is also a major focus of this city. So the whole play of My Fair Lizard Folk, in which you have this lizard folk soldier who was essentially penniless before the war, and is then, because of his newfound status, is sort of brought into this upper echelon and is being introduced to these people, but he doesn't really gel with them, not only on the basis that, he comes from a very different background, but also because of very real racial tension between the people of that class and the lizard folk, because in this world, lizard folk are considered lesser people. It is meant to be just like this direct mirror of what's happening in the city. So when we had that moment up in the upper balcony, and I think it was Silva. I'm trying to remember who exactly it was. I think it was Silva who got the high enough role that you essentially had this sort of insight into how each of these people were perceiving the play and what they took away from it, and how that related to how they viewed the world itself. How Cassowary was obsessed with everything around the play because he was an architect, and he's really proud of his ancestors' work on the building itself and the stage, and how Sander Toxley was very focused on the main character, on the lead, because of his shared soldier background and that very similar connection that he has of being in this different social status than he was before, and so on and so forth. This whole crazy thing was meant to be just like a way of giving you guys a peek into this world and into this lifestyle, again, without expressly having the characters just be like, well, we're rich, so we're better than the poor people, and you know, certain people aren't as good as we are, and so on. It's just my blanket refusal to just tell a story like a normal person would, and instead be like, let me use another element within this to actually describe everything. I want to, before we wrap up here, because there's still a fair bit of the campaign that we're sort of heading towards, I am curious, because from this point on, everything happens at the Velvet Curtain. We do end up going south. We go to the King's Forest. We encounter spiders. I will make sure that we do not encounter spiders to that degree in this campaign again. Another great example of lessons the DMs have to learn, which is that you want to make sure that you know exactly what it is that the players are okay with and what they're not okay with. Silva, just a quick point of order. I had it on the table that for a certain roll that you made, if you had gotten a nat 20 on, your connection to the Fae would have been so strong in that moment that you would have opened a portal, and the bear that you all had saved in the forest that came back and fought against the spider would have been transported through the portal and would have been aiding you in the fight against. I had that set up as an option from the get-go. And the bear was one of those things where I just wholesale ripped off Resident Evil 4. And was like,
Save the dog.
Because you have the dog, where the dog, you save the dog, and then later when you're fighting El Gigante, the dog comes back and helps you. Wholesale rip that off. I wanted to have an opportunity. It's like, here's a bear caught in a trap. If you guys free the bear, it's going to come back and help you later. Otherwise, it doesn't.
Save the dog, save the world.
Save the dog, save the world. Exactly.
John Wick.
So that was one of those things where it was like, again, I love just setting things up and putting them off to the side, and then if you engage with them, that's great. If you don't, it's whatever. But I'm a weirdo, and I refuse to just tell a traditional story, even in the confines of a tabletop RPG, because I really focus on like these specific things, and I go like, let me span this out as much as possible and have that tell the story for me, instead of me just like, you know, asking for a history check and then me telling you the full history of how the city runs and how it works and how everything is connected. I want to address combat in general, because when we went through the King's Forest, you guys didn't do a traditional form of combat. We did something very different, where you guys were kind of actively moving through and more so trying to avoid direct conflict as opposed to engaging in it. That was a result of me very seriously looking at 5e as a system and knowing that combat in a lot of forms takes a long time to go through. And for the purposes of this part of the story, I didn't want you guys to be spending 3 or 4 sessions just getting through this forest on the traditional rules of 5e combat and approaching everything one at a time, and, you know, just kind of going through. It kind of harkens back to the whole, I don't want to put you in a position where it's just like, okay, go kill 10 boars and then collect your reward with the Guildmaster. Almost every combat session you've done, I've tried to do something to change it up in some way, because I like a lot of elements about 5e, but I think combat in general can be one of its weaker points, specifically in pacing. And as we've established, the pacing of this game has ballooned out far greater than I ever expected it to be. So I plan to continue sort of, you know, with future combat sessions, I want to kind of do unique things and try different ways of approaching it in the future. But I also want to know explicitly from you guys if you would prefer for them to stay more in the traditional line of D&D combat, or if you're okay with us kind of continuing to try like different things as we go.
I'm definitely on board with trying new things. I do enjoy traditional D&D combat, so like I don't want to move entirely away from it. But I do enjoy the change ups that we've had where it's like, okay, well, let's try something new. This is something that, we're not necessarily that we've done before, so it's, it's a novel experience. Even if we don't do it again moving forward, like it's still an experience, and we can work towards kind of figuring out what we as a group and what you as the DM like really want to, how we want to address combat moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always into doing different things. I mean, obviously, inherently, I think, obviously from a familiarity standpoint, there's only obviously so much that'll be changed anyway. So, I mean, like, I'm very into the idea, though, of obviously always expanding and looking into unique and interesting, like options and variations and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I want more phalanxes.
Gotcha.
I just want to see one phalanx. That's all I
Okay.
ask for. Maybe like an archery line at some point.
Yeah.
It could be us. It could be someone else.
I
I
mean,
just want
D&D
phalanx.
5e has the inherent factor of you can have a shield that's this big, a shield that's this big, or a shield the size of you, but they're all the same.
They're all the same shield. Just
So
like
well.
how Caspian has a giant, definitely not Buster sword, but it has a lot of the properties of a sword that is much smaller. Because I wasn't going to give him just like a completely broken weapon right from the get-go. He's not even a character.
He's not even. His real name is Clark Bart.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I got you.
Clark Bart Investigations, we gotta stay focused on that. Okay. We're running over time. We're running over time. So there's one more thing that I want to do, guys, before we wrap the night off. So next week we are gonna return back. It'll be the start of a new arc. Technically, we're gonna still be in the city of Rote, because you all as a group are gonna have kind of a major decision to make as far as which of the two main options you want to take, or if you want to take option C, which is go anywhere. And there are a couple of you who have some things that you would like to wrap up, some loose ends, some people you need to talk to, obviously, in order to make that decision possible. So we're not going to rush you out of that. We're going to still give you the option to do that. For tonight, I need you all to do me a favor. Okay, so you're going to take your left hand, you're going to raise it up. All three of you. Yep. And then you're going to take your right hand, raise that up as well. So you've got both hands raised. All right. Now you're going to cross both of your arms like this. Keep them held tight.
Mm-hmm.
Do not move them from that point. Keep them like they are. It's quiz time. So here's what's going to happen. You cannot access your phones, your internet, your computer in any way.
Oh, this supposed to make sense now.
Because I am going to quiz you all. You will have 5 minutes to try to answer as many questions correctly as you can.
Damn.
Oh God. Marlon.
If you fail to answer a certain number of questions, which I'm not going to tell you, something extremely bad is going to happen to your party.
Oh fuck.
If you succeed, all of you get an additional 10 hit points. I don't mean temporary. I mean you get an additional 10 hit points, period.
Ooh, yeah.
And you get 2 platinum apiece.
Hey, that's 20 gold.
I haven't used the 6 that I have.
Like I say, it's not temp. This is for realsies. You get to keep them. So you're gonna have 5 minutes. You can skip a question if you want to, but there's only gonna be so many questions, and you don't know how many. You can all confer with each other, and if somebody thinks they have the answer, you're gonna want to go honk, and then that'll be the buzzer to tell me that you're ready to give your answer.
Gotcha.
Like I say, you're able to confer with each other, no problem with that. You just can't use any outside resources. No Google, no computer, no phone.
Why don't you put your hand back?
I just had my sudden urge to push on my
What that
front
hand doing? What that hand doing? All right, everybody ready?
No,
Sure.
but go on.
3, 2, 1,
I hate you.
go. First question. Which of the character alignment options in the Dungeons & Dragons basic rules is missing here? Chaotic, lawful, good, evil, and blank.
Neutral.
Well, honk.
Honk.
That is
Neutral.
That is correct. That is correct. Make sure you honk though. Gotta make sure you honk.
Well, I mean, that wasn't a answer. It was a conference with everyone else, and then we would
Okay.
honk and answer.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That's right.
I jumped the gun. Okay.
We jumped the honk.
This is an Eberron specific question.
Okay.
Oh God.
In Eberron, the Mark of Sentinel helps the humans of House Denaeth run the Sentinel Marshals, a law enforcement group with no boundary. Which nation did they originate in?
Okay. It could be.
I have no fucking
Nation, I believe I think the nation is whatever the fuck one we're in now. It's escaping me.
Corvair.
No, it's a fucking continent.
Fuck, you're right.
No, the one we're in now that starts with a B.
Breland.
Yeah, I believe they're from Breland.
I mean, I can't think of any other ones. To be
Breland?
honest with you. Yeah. Because
Okay, well, do we want to answer that then?
sure.
All right.
Kevin, you got the honors.
Honk. Brayland.
That is incorrect. The answer was Karnath.
Fuck
Karnath.
you. Didn't even know that was a place.
Yeah,
Moving on, we're time.
We've been
Dylan,
able
let's
to do
go.
all this exploring.
Next question. What 9th level spell, which has appeared in every edition of D&D, allows magic users to do pretty much anything?
All right, this is the wish spell,
So
right,
I'm gonna
guys?
go with the wish probably.
Yeah,
so
wish.
We'll go with the honk and say wish.
That is correct.
All
right. Here's a good one. What is the name of the 5-headed dragon that is a frequent D&D archvillain?
Oh, come on. I know
Tiamat.
this.
Honk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Honk. Tiamat.
All right, that is correct.
Okay. It took too long to respond back, and I got worried.
I know. Don't worry. I'm not counting it against your time. Strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. What's missing?
Honk. Constitution.
That is correct. Next question. Reincarnate and Raise Dead are both 5th level spells that can bring a dead character back to life. What is the most crucial difference between these spells in Dungeons and Dragons?
Honk.
Oh, go ahead.
Reincarnate does not specify whether or not you return as what you were.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
As in the species that you
Yeah.
were originally.
Yeah, as a like you're not the species that you, or it doesn't guarantee that you're the species that you were.
I'm gonna take it. I'll allow it. Raise Dead revives the character's original body, while Reincarnate restores their soul to a new healthy body.
You get to roll on the table for it. It's fun.
The measure of a character's current health in D&D is called what?
Okay, this could be just hit points. Overall hit points is
Yeah,
what I'm
just-
thinking.
Just say it.
Yeah. Okay, honk. Hit points.
That is correct.
Cool. All right. I was overthinking it.
That's a weirdly phrased question.
It really is. That's why I was overthinking it.
In Dungeons & Dragons, the figurines often used in conjunction with the game are now largely made of plastic or pewter. Pewter figurines replaced what other type?
This reminds me, Franny, I left my tiny, my little mini in your car.
That's true. Yeah, I think I did find it. I need to give it back to you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be tin, if I remember correctly, guys?
I have no idea.
Because
Your guess is as good as
I just know
mine.
that they were colloquially just like nomenclature, which is metal. So
right.
Yeah, that's
I don't know if it was
That is
tin or
true.
not.
I am thinking like tin soldiers in that space. I don't think it's lead because lead would be bad.
we put a lead in a lot of things.
We do put lead in a lot of things.
The total like a
Like the
lead
paint there,
soldier
like-
would have been very clearly problematic, like immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and answer that, Franny.
Okay, honk. Let's go with tin, my good man.
That is incorrect. It
Shit.
was lead.
It was
What the fuck?
Ah, damn it.
Okay.
Okay, Dungeons and Dragons, we know it, we love it. There's actually two main types of dragons, metallic and blank.
Honk, chromatic.
That is correct.
Yeah,
I
Kevin.
forgot the third type of dragon.
Right. Oh my god. How could you forget the gem dragons? Are you even a fan?
Guys,
They're invisible.
one gold piece in this game, a gold Galifar, equals how many copper pieces in game?
I always do this math wrong. It's 100 though, isn't it?
It is 100, yes. Because it's
That is correct. It is 100.
okay. Technically, it did say honk. So okay, cool.
All right, minute and a half left. You guys ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. 3 square windows. God damn it. I told myself I wouldn't laugh, and I did it anyway. 3 square windows can be seen in the back of this painting, and the back of a chair takes up its lower center portion. The central figure is wearing red and blue, with his hands on a table. To his right is an effeminate figure believed to be Apostle John. Judas clutches a bag of silver in what Leonardo da Vinci painting that depicts Christ's final meal with his disciples?
This is the Last Supper, right,
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
Last Supper. I said honk.
Sorry, somebody honk?
yeah.
I said honk.
Honk, the Last Supper.
That is correct.
This is martial erasure.
The law of these objects
Oh no.
states that the torque on one side is equal to the torque on the other side. Name these simple machines, familiar examples of which include a wheelbarrow and a seesaw.
I have no fucking clue.
The law
Honk,
of
lever. Right. Is it a lever or is it a
Well, you honked.
isn't it Newton's laws of motion?
well no, it's the object, like the
Yeah, he's asking about the name of the object.
Oh, yeah. Just go with a lever.
yeah. I mean I honked, I
Yeah.
said it
I
anyways.
already
But
said honk lever, so.
Okay, honk lever is correct.
okay.
Oh fuck yeah!
Next question. This artist credits producer Aaron Dessinée on 11 songs in an album, which also contains a teenage love triangle. This artist gained fame through albums like 1989 and Red, and Exile and Cardigan appear on her album Folklore. Name this artist who sang You Need to Calm Down and Lover.
This is Taylor Swift.
Is it Taylor Swift?
Oh,
Is it
yeah,
T
let's
Swift?
Say red. That would be. Yeah, that was her album.
Yeah.
Okay, honk. It's Taylor Swift, also known as T Swift.
Correct, it is T Swift. Very good. Next question. Rescue Team DX is a remake of the original in this franchise's Mystery Dungeon series.
Honk.
Sword and
Pokemon.
Shield. That is correct. Nicely done.
I'm intimately familiar with the Mystery Dungeon games.
Thank God you are.
Next question. 30 seconds left. This man's fifth symphony begins with a short, long motif.
I fucking
One of this man's piano pieces begins by alternating E and D sharp. That work is Fur Elise. Name the composer.
For the least, isn't that Mozart?
Yes,
because
it's French.
Okay,
Yeah,
go for it.
Beethoven. Honk, Mozart.
That is incorrect. That is
Was it
Ludwig van
Beethoven?
Beethoven.
It was Beethoven. Fucking
How dare
shit.
that
Those are
German
the
use
two that
French.
I was. Those
Those
are
are
the
the
two
only
that I
two,
was
yeah.
between. Is
How dare
Mozart
that
and
German
Beethoven?
use
So
French?
Next question.
Hurry
In
up.
this country, an annual red crab migration takes place on Christmas Island. This country's state of Queensland contains the Great Barrier Reef and
It's Australia.
dingoes and cockatoos.
Honk, Australia.
That is correct.
Okay. You said Queensland. I'm like, wait, I know that.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
All right, final two questions. Here we go. What was unique about the Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition Monstrous Compendium?
Fuck, I think I know this. I'm gonna shoot a guess, guys.
yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
You said 2nd edition Monstrous Compendium?
Compendium, yeah.
2nd edition.
Fuck. Honk. It was the first one to use Thaco?
I'm afraid that's incorrect. I'm sorry.
Shit.
The books were 3-ring binders that allowed players to add additional monster pages as they were released.
Oh, that's so
It would
interesting.
be part of the
That's-
Monsters Compendium, yeah. So that would have nothing. to
Yeah,
do with
that's
that.
pretty sick.
All right, final question. Patricia Poling started an entire organization that opposed Dungeons and Dragons. What was it called?
Oh, they're.
Oh,
the
my God.
opposing one?
Is this?
Like the organization?
Yeah.
What is the name of the organization that Patricia Poling started?
Oh,
Isn't that
fuck.
Oh fuck. Moms Against D&D.
No, it
Couldn't be
was.
like that, 'cause it couldn't be mad. Yeah, it couldn't be like mad like that. Maybe it is,
Oh,
I'm fucking ruining it, but
Darkest Dungeons.
that's the name of the piece.
Fuck. Lords and Saviors.
No, it's.
Fuck.
Fuck. Because they wouldn't have used the name in the title because
Right.
that would be like acknowledging it. It was like it's like something. It had something to do with like being Christian. I'm pretty sure.
The Holy Games.
No, like it had like Christians. Like it's something against something. Like
Christians against roleplay.
Yeah, let's fucking say
Chris-
that, sure.
Yeah.
Let's-
Oh.
go ahead. Just
Yeah. Okay.
We can have anything that's concrete.
Honk, is it Christians against roleplay in games?
I'm
Tell me-
afraid
Just tell me it's wrong.
Just-
that is incorrect.
just say
Yeah,
it's
okay.
wrong. We know
That's
it's
it.
wrong.
what was it? Please don't tell me we actually said it.
You were closer than you thought you were.
Yeah.
Well, what is it?
You mentioned MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Patricia Poling started an organization known as BAD,
Bad.
Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons.
Really? Really?
Yep.
They did
That's
exactly
not clever at
Of
all.
course not. Why would it be clever?
Jesus. Just bothered. Like you
Bothered.
create this whole organization just because
What a
you're
bother.
bothered. That's such a very like low impact word to use.
What a bother.
God.
What a bother.
Oh man.
Bother. I could go for a smackerel funny.
Speaking of which, Kevin, you look like that one YouTuber that does those really great impressions of like Pooh and Rick from
Brock
Rick and
Baker.
Morty. That's the one. There's
I
a
have no idea who
similarity in
this
your
is,
facial
so-
structure.
I can kind of see it.
How do we do, Dylan?
So here's the deal. I could tell you how you did,
Oh, you're gonna
I
hold
feel
it.
like we did pretty good.
Oh, you cuck.
or
Wow.
well, okay. Well, then I'm definitely not going to tell you now.
I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're just backtracking.
Or y'all can roll for it.
Just a random roll, or
So all three of you are going to roll a d20. You collectively need to beat the number 30. I'm going to say you got to beat 30 as a group.
Okay, guys.
All right, here we go. Ready?
Bro, I got a dog to let out.
Bro, I have a dog in my ass and needs to come out. I need to take a shit.
Jesus.
Oh, I didn't do great, boys.
Okay, well I have a 20, so
I have a 4, I think. No, that's a 7. It's a 7, 27.
We didn't make it.
you roll a 1.
What'd you get?
I rolled a natural one.
God damn
Damn
it!
it!
God damn it!
I
did
knew
so
I
much
shouldn't
for
have used
you.
this dice. This die has been rolling fucking terribly. I put away my other ones though.
I did this for you, and this is how you repay me.
My
So-
other one
so-
rolled a 9.
So let's recap. So I established multiple times this evening throughout the conversation that I, as a person, like to fixate on very specific things, and I like to plant elements. And I will sometimes go to the trouble of building up really complicated structures just to hit a simple solution. So let's take tonight, for example. My goal tonight was to get somebody to roll a natural 1. So the way I did that is that I made up a quiz game on the spot, and then I had you guys go through the trouble of playing the quiz game, and then had you guys roll at the end to see whether or not you passed or succeeded instead of just telling you right away. So now, next time on Dragonmark Symphony,
Brought to it by
all of us
Natural
will be
Media.
reconvening, and we are going to find out what the results of that natural 1 were. So until then, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for playing and for dealing with my madness.
Of course.
And we'll see you all next time. Fear the Red. Take care.
Don't you say that right before we leave. What the hell?
See, the thing about McCarthy is that, he was